Hey, 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 this is Seagrove, and today I'm joined by Tate Whitesell, who is basically Pokestats. Tate, why don't you introduce yourself, and then I'll talk about what we're doing.
All right. Yeah, as you said, that about sums it up. I am PokeStats more or less. I mean, there's plenty. It's definitely more than a one man effort in terms of all the players who send me event results, who help me out with the data, the tier lists, and all that kind of stuff. But I'm
Sure.
the person behind the scenes putting it all together. Um, and obviously not a huge name player or anything. I've made my name just based on PokeStats for now. I'm hoping I'll get some results in the future, but
Similar
that's
boat.
me.
Okay, great. Well, your content's awesome. So let's talk about what we're going to do. What we're doing here is actually end of season awards. We're going to be talking about sort of awards like Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, stuff, things like that, and we'll get into what those are going to be. But we're just going to go through and talk about who we believe should get these awards that we decided to give out. And you can disagree or agree. Just let us know. PM us angry things or just respond to the comments. Whatever is cool.
And we'll probably disagree with each other. So
Yeah. So hope, and we're going to be doing this hopefully as long as we're both still content creators next season and the season after. And I suspect we'll get better at it as we are. We've been in the scene for a longer time and we're more familiar with what's going on. But just to be clear, this is end of season. I know it's a little strange because it's coming at the end of the calendar year, but we just decided to do this. So we're doing this for last season. So for instance, towards EUIC win would not be considered because it was the current season and not the 2016-2017 season.
yeah.
Okay, so just so we're clear on that. But anyways, let's go ahead and get right into it. So what's the first award we're talking about?
So the first thing we decided to come up with was going with a Rookie of the Year. And this isn't technically like a first year player, but a first year master is where we were going with this.
So
Um,
this could be
yeah.
someone who is a first year player who is a
Yeah.
master, or it could be first year someone who
Okay.
aged up. So my pick for this is pretty easy. It's Xander Pero because he obviously, as Tate reminded me, got third at Worlds, which is pretty cool. But he also won Dallas. I want to say that was
Mhm.
Gardevoir,
Yeah.
but
It was
okay.
Carter.
And then got fourth at Mexico, top 32 the NAIC. Um, uh, yeah, and then no top 32 Australia and the NAIC,
Yeah.
and he had a few other top 32s at regionals. So he definitely killed it. As not only was he pretty much undoubtedly the best rookie of the year, but he was one of the better players of the year last year, just in general. So
For sure. And like getting a six prizes writing gig on top of that, I think that's pretty impressive.
yeah, he's a
And if
good
he
writer.
he is a good writer.
He's a
And
bright young man.
I'm looking at his Limitless page right now, and it looks like that regional win was the last day of 2016. It was Dallas Regionals, so it didn't even take him, until the end of the season. He came right out of the gates and was
Yeah,
winning a regional more or less.
yeah,
And he stayed consistent with
yeah,
these results. So he would also be Xander would also be my pick for um, the Rookie of the Year, so to speak. Even though he definitely had accomplishments in the senior division before that, but
yeah, for sure. So congratulations, Xander. You don't get anything.
got a
Um,
unanimous decision.
yeah, awesome. So the second one we wanted to do was deck builder of the year. Um, the person who was maybe the most influential deck builder. This one was a little bit confusing for not maybe confusing, but
Well,
I
there's a
wasn't
lot of
confident in the answer. So why don't you go ahead and talk about it?
yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can go with this one. Like for example, if you look at the start of the season, you had Evil Tall Garb being the big deck. I remember running the stats on it, and it was taking like 50% of the metagame at day two of regionals and stuff, and I was like, that's
Right.
crazy. Um, So I looked at that and I couldn't, kind of figure out who, if there was one player behind that deck. There really wasn't. There was, always a group of players
Hmm.
perfecting it, changing the list between events. So then I looked at kind of the next format defining deck after that, and that was Decidueye Vileplume. Um, so I looked at, and I remember distinctly, I don't remember who tweeted it, but I remember someone on Twitter saying, like, I'm sitting next to John Kedler. Uh, it was at a regional, and he's playing this absurd Vileplume Decidueye colorless attackers deck. I don't know what it is. Um, and then I remember I gotta check, but I think that was a standard regional, and Kedler took that deck and played like basically the same deck with a computer search and expanded,
Yeah.
and everyone was like, "Whoa, this is actually this is something."
Yeah, I think other people were joining him by that point, a few
At that
others.
point, they were like, "Oh, he's onto something here." So that was, but as far as I know, and I guess I'm gonna look silly if I'm wrong on this, but I think it was John Kedler who was the person who
Hmm.
pretty much invented Decidueye Plume,
Okay.
and it ended up just taking over the format for regionals after that. It didn't win Oceania. Pablo Mesa was second at Oceania with it because he had to play Volcanion in the finals, and then it won South America.
Right.
Um, so a first and a second at Internats, over a span of a couple months. That's a pretty significant deck. And then the one that came after that, I guess the format defining deck after that would be Drampa Garb.
Hmm.
But that was another case of like no one player
Right.
is behind that. That was just everyone collectively decided
Yeah,
Garb was the best card in the format.
for sure. So I
So
actually had the same. I thought John Kettler as well, and then I thought, well, what about Tord? Because his list was like that big list is so different and really
right.
cool. He was my second thought, but then because so many other people did sort of the same thing, I was like, well, his was the best, but other people had very similar, or his was probably the best, but others had very similar lists, or very. I mean, the archetype was there, and then my third thought was John Roberts because he sort of did something super unique.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
And he was on it the whole season too
yeah,
with Bulu.
once he
Yeah.
joined.
Well, as soon as Bulu was out. Um, yeah, those are good options. I mean, I don't know that I'd go with John Roberts just because as much as I, appreciate what he did, like making such a creative deck and staying on it the whole season, it wasn't the deck that had, it's not like, oh, 2/3 of the people in this day two are playing Bulu.
Yeah,
So I see where you're going with Tord. I think like when you put 4 Tapu Lele in that list, just to get like the maximum consistency out of the deck. So yeah, him or John Kedler, I think maybe like deck builder of the year, just in terms of creating and successfully piloting the 2 decks that had the biggest impact on the format.
I'm. I think I'm more on Kettler because his was much more unique, and or he wasn't standing on the shoulders of so many
Yeah,
other people who
exactly.
were already doing it.
Exactly.
But I think I'm actually leaning more towards John Roberts just because his list was like like a shock to people. Like, whoa, look how different this is than what everyone else has been doing. Like, there was a way that you build decks, and you had to have these cards. You had
Yeah,
to have
yeah,
X Sycamore, like 3 or 4 Sycamore, 3 or 4 N, 4 VS Seeker, and he was like, nope. So I'm actually gonna pick, even though Kettler made a better deck for sure. I'm gonna pick John Roberts because it was so different. It was so
okay.
other, and it was so. I would call it the most creative, um, and strongest standalone deck. Like it was just what didn't build on it, basically anything else. I would say.
Yeah.
Um,
See, I just can't bring myself to give any awards to Bulu. That's
Boo! Fair enough.
But yeah, I see where you're going with that. I definitely agree.
So
And the couple times I've played around with that deck, I've just been like, this is so cool.
it is
So
cool. So would you say Kettler or Tord?
I'd have to go with Kettler just for the reason you outlined, where he was pretty much, as far as I know, again, he was the guy who pretty much just came up with that deck completely from scratch.
Okay, cool. All right, so what's the third one we wanted to do here?
We were looking at the rogue decks actually.
Okay,
So we're gonna do kind of a rogue of the year, I guess you could say.
okay,
The deck that and that maybe actually there's an argument here for John Roberts' Boohoo deck. You could put that in this category maybe, but someone who came up with a deck that it was entirely their creation and it was so off the wall, just in terms of like nothing that anyone was expecting, and it took down an event. Maybe it didn't win, but it did well. So did you have any thoughts on this? Because I know where I would go with
yeah.
this, but
So the one you mentioned I think is awesome, but I'm not going to steal your thunder there. But here's some other ones that I agree with you with yours, but here are some other ones that I think are worth mentioning. There was a Mega Alakazam that I think top
oh
32
yeah,
or something,
I didn't even think of
or
that. It
top
was
16.
Johnny Rabus. Yeah.
Okay, I don't remember where he finished with it, but I remember it was in a top
Let's see.
something.
I can look it up right now.
And then
Um,
the other one, while there was Mewtwo, which was kind of cool, I think it was just so close to Mewtwo that like the I'm talking about the Fury Belt just
yeah,
Mewtwo EX damage change. It was so close to Mewtwo Mega Mewtwo that I don't. It's not an option for me, but it was something I thought about.
yeah,
But I guess the second place to me is Fairy Pancakes
yeah.
because that deck was awesome.
Sam Chen, first player to GX attack on stream,
Yeah,
polarizing pancake.
so that was pretty cool. But all of them I think fall short of the one you brought up. So why don't you go ahead and talk about that?
All right, so when I was thinking about more awards to give out to people, I was like, we should give Grant Manley an award for he should have won that regional. uh, and I mean, absolutely no disrespect to James Arnold who won it with Quad Lapras, but Grant built a deck that was just designed to counter everything in the
Right.
metagame, and no one was expecting Quad
It was
Wobbuffet.
on no one's radar.
It was on no one's radar. It
Right.
was like 4 Wobbuffet, and you play like, Araquanid. What does that do? I'm sure that the amount of people who must have had to read what Araquanid did during that tournament. Um, and then, as luck would have it, sitting down in the finals and getting paired against the one other deck that no one was really expecting, although people at least knew about it,
Yeah.
and that happens to be the one deck that can beat you,
Yeah.
Quad Lapras. So, but I think if you go back and look at the list that Grant put together, and the couple of times he was on stream, it was Roanoke Regionals, Virginia
Yeah.
Regionals. Um, it was just such a fun deck to watch, and it had an answer to everything where you could, you know,
Ninja
if you
Boy.
put down the Araquanid against Volcanion, it was before Tapu Lele was in the format, so
Right.
Volcanion had no answer to that.
Yeah.
You could put down like Jolteon against Turbo Darkrai, it had no answer to that. You had Wobbuffet against Decidueye, it couldn't really do anything.
Yeah.
It was just, I remember, seeing it, reporting on it. I was like, that is so smart. So I think easily my award for like the rogue deck builder of the year, most exciting or most notable rogue of the year, has to go to Grant Manley and Quad Wobbuffet.
Definitely, I definitely agree with that. That was awesome. At that tournament, I was playing Rainbow Road, and
Oh,
Grant
yeah.
was like, I think you're one of the only decks here that could beat mine. And so he kept asking me like, "How are you doing?" And I knew what he was asking. I was like,
That's funny.
"Okay."
How did that work out for you? Because if you,
I whiffed top. I was
You
like
whiffed
top
top, yeah.
64.
because that would have been interesting to see, like
I think he
Rainbow
would have
Road,
beat me honestly.
Quad Wob.
I
You
would-
think-
yeah.
You would have beat anyone.
Maybe he could have beaten it with Rainbow Road, but I don't think I knew enough about what his deck was trying to do to.
Yeah.
It
I
was,
don't think anyone.
Yeah. Anyways, he definitely is worthy of that award. That quad wob was awesome. So
Yeah.
I agree. So the next one that we were talking about was Team of the Year, and you mentioned one. Well, I think you would be better to talk about this.
Yeah, so I went and tabulated the numbers for this one. I didn't look at every team because I knew there were some that were, not fully put together, or just didn't have kind of the competitive clout maybe as some of the big teams.
Yeah, and remember
But
this was last season for the
yeah,
viewers.
yeah. So I looked at Someone's PC, I looked at CCG Castle, I looked at ARG, and I looked at Limitless. And I guess you could make the argument that I probably should have looked at some more of the non-US teams, but I think, Limitless probably the biggest one, at least in that point in the season. So I went and I actually just went through the Limitless website database, which is honestly one of my favorite resources when I'm covering the game, and I just need to check a quick fact. So let's see. Okay, so I looked at ARG first, and the first thing I noticed was that they started out with a roster when they put the team together that's very different from what the roster is now.
Okay.
Now you only have 2 players who are on the original roster, which were Grant Manley and Michael Canavis. And every other player who's on the squad now joined either after last season was over or very late, like June or July of the season. So that's why ARG, I was surprised, collectively their team earned a total of 108 Limitless points in the 2016 to 17 season.
While on the team. Because they had other people who would have been added, but they would have added points to that, but were added to the team after
that's
they had
just
earned those
like
points.
while the team was in existence and when the team members were part of the team.
Okay.
And of those, it was Michael Canavis who had the biggest share. He got 44 of those 108 points. So ARG, like, obviously this season, they've added Michael Pramwat, they've added John Ang, they've added Connor Fenton. So they have, a lot of big names and a lot of ways to rack up those points. But last season, it just wasn't there because their roster was changing so much.
Okay.
So I looked at Limitless next, the European team. And first and foremost, there you have the Schultz brothers, who are just insane. They took down like every event in Europe, usually playing a dark deck, not always.
I net decked that Darkrai list once. So.
Yeah, it was just too strong. So they scored a total of 333 points per their own database, which is kind of funny. And it was Philip Schultz who narrowly beat out his brother. He got 123, which is 37% of his team's points. And I'm actually going to come back to that later in the video because that's something worth talking about on its own, I think.
Okay.
So Limitless was like big, but they only had 5 players on the roster. I think maybe 5 or 6 players on the roster. They weren't as big as a couple other teams. So even with like powerhouses like the Schultz brothers and Jesper Eriksson, they were 3rd place of the teams that I looked at.
Okay, and is that in your opinion, or is that straight numbers?
That's just straight coming from the numbers in terms of like the hard Limitless points that they use on their site.
And does that do an average of points per player, or is that raw? Like,
so I just went and looked at the individual players and how they performed over the season, and I added up all their individual points while they were members of the team.
It may be worth it to consider like an average, like points per player on the team, because if if your team is like Tord and Pram, and that's it. That's pretty solid.
That would be a good thing to look at. And I mean, if I were doing that for this season, I definitely would do that with, the teams being a little bit more fleshed out.
Yeah.
So the second highest amount of Limitless points went to Team CCG Castle, and I'd honestly expected them to be number 1 because this season there's putting up insane finishes. Mm-hmm. 3 CCG Castle players have won a regional this season. That's 3 out of their 5 players.
Yeah.
So that speaks for itself. But last season, what I figured out was that they picked up Azul very late in the season. It was around June, I think. And Azul actually left Someone's PC and went to CCG Castle. So he didn't earn them any points during that season because he didn't earn limitless points at North American internationals or at Worlds.
Okay.
So it was Jimmy Pendarvis, Igor Costa, Rahul Reddy, and who's the other one?
For CCG Castle?
Yeah.
Ryan
I can't think.
Sablehouse? I don't know if he was on at the
Ryan
time.
Sablehouse. I can't think of that. So between the four of them, they still put up really impressive numbers. They got 457 limitless points.
Oh, wow.
Even without Azul accounting for any of those. So that's really impressive. And
For sure.
Jimmy Pendarvis was the number one among them. He had 140 points, but Igor was really close second with just one less point. He had 139.
Okay.
So they were right on each other's heels the whole season.
Cool.
But when I, finished adding up the numbers, adding up the limitless points, it was clear it's pretty much a blowout. It was someone's PC who had the most successful year in terms of just as a team, the total number of limitless points they accumulated. And part of that, definitely you could argue that they have a lot of team members.
Right.
They have more than the others. But there were some of those team members, I'm looking here, like Chris Toporco, Mark Albright, definitely good players, but they didn't travel that much. They only have a couple of regional finishes here. So really it was their big players like Kenny Britton, Kiana Meany, Israel Sosa, Drew Kennett won the first regional of the season. Russ Lepar had some good finishes. So
and Azul had 2 wins.
Azul had 2 wins, yeah, that's true. And Azul was on someone's PC when he had those wins. And if he'd made the switch to CCG Castle earlier in the season, it would be a completely different story. But he was there for his 2 regional wins. He was there when it counted, and it was someone's PC far and away that had the most successful season, just in terms of like the hard data, which is how I'm looking at it right now. But if you have any thoughts on a less mathematical approach to it, there's definitely that aspect too.
Well, the only thing I would say is counting players. I think there does need to be some balance there with terms of amount of players.
Yeah,
and
I should have taken that into account.
But at the same time, these teams have to buy the players, not really buy them, but there's a cost involved in having a player on your team.
Exactly.
And so I think that's I don't think it completely cancels out the number of players, but that is an investment that the team has chosen to make. And so this shouldn't be yes, if you have 100 players, obviously you're going to have the most, but you're putting an investment there. So that's sort of a move of the team, if you will. So now I definitely agree that someone's PC was the team, since Azul was on there for his 2 wins. I think that sort of seals it. Yeah. That's awesome for him. But yeah, I agree. Congratulations, someone's PC.
Yeah. And I'm not just saying that because I've taken up the someone's PC tier list gig now. If you've seen, I've been working with them. But no, this is all just looking at the numbers. It's all objective. So
there's 3 types of lies, right?
Lies, damn lies, statistics.
That's right. So let's look at the next thing. And again, I think this is you, MVP of a team. You can go ahead and explain that.
Okay, so I mentioned a few minutes ago when I was talking about Limitless how Philip Schultz took 37% of Limitless points, as confusing as that is to say. It's the Limitless competitive team, and they're running the Limitless database, but it was, 123 out of their 333 Limitless points. So that's over a third of his team's points, and keep in mind that they had 6 players on the team. So I ran the numbers on the other players. Like for someone's PC, it was Kiana Meany, who was kind of their heavyweight in terms of the highest percentage of their points won. For CCG Castle, I said it was Pendarvis. Igor was also close.
Right.
And for ARG, it was Canavis. But none of them came close to that 37% of their team's points that Philip Schultz had. So there's not a lot of discussion to this one. It's a pretty simple, mathematically based award. But the team MVP, the most valuable player to their team would be Philip Schultz, just because of how productive he was.
Yeah. So this is basically like who carried their team the most. And it
Yeah,
doesn't necessarily have to go to the team that won or a team that even was like first or second, but just how much sort of the gap in terms of how the best player to the second best player, or what percentage of the points the best player was.
and to put it in perspective a little bit, even if you kicked everyone else off of Limitless and it was just Philip, he would still have won more Limitless points than all of ARG did during that season. And obviously, ARG was going through roster changes. They didn't have Pram, they didn't have Connor Fenton, they didn't have John Eng.
Right. They only had like two.
But even still,
Yeah.
they had, a fair, pretty decent roster of players, and Philip Schultz beat all of them combined, which is impressive.
So he definitely killed it. So he is the team MVP. That sounds good to me. The team MVP for award goes to Philip Schultz. And then the last award we want to talk about is Player of the Year. And this one I think is the most exciting and the most controversial, and the hardest to pick of the ones that we've done so far. So let's get into it. Why don't you start? We sort of divided up who we would talk about, but why don't you start since you have three?
All right. So we did narrow down our list collectively to 5 players, it looks like. This is pretty good list. Pretty good list of 5 players. The first one I want to talk about as a contender would be Sam Chen. And I was tweeting up a storm about Sam Chen towards the end of the season. I remember anyone who was like following my coverage, I was like, Sam Chen's doing it again. He's unbeatable. He top 4'd North American internationals. He won a regional. He top 4'd 2 regionals. He top 8'd worlds. Like, it didn't stop. It was every event he was in the top 8. He was top 4ing it. He was winning it. And I think it just says like so much about his consistency and like just his skill as a player. Like, to show up to that many events and to do that well at all of them is really impressive. We've almost never seen that level of consistent, like, incredible success. So I think just like maybe he didn't have the most wins, maybe he didn't have the biggest, flashiest win, but he was just always there, top 8ing huge events when it mattered.
Okay. So the first person I was going to talk about actually was Tord. So Tord's accomplishments, like, he wasn't even on my radar, honestly, until he won NAIC. Because I'm new to the scene, I just didn't really know. But Tord, okay, so here is a list of things of Tord's accomplishments last season. He top 4'd London.
Mm-hmm.
He top 4'd Sheffield. He top 32'd Oceania. And then obviously he won NAIC.
Yeah.
And then also he got 5th at a special event, 17th in Malmo as well. So he killed it, but it was off my radar until NAIC, and I'm like, who is this guy? Just because I unfortunately have my overseas knowledge of the game is very lacking, just because I'm a new player and a relatively new player to the community. But I'm working on it. My European friends, I'm sorry, and South American friends, and Australia, and then Asia is doing its own thing. I don't really know what's going on, and there are almost no events in Africa. So sorry, Africa, but I love you all, and I will learn. I promise I will learn. But anyways, yeah, Tord did great. So he's definitely someone to consider.
It was a learning process for me too, because that London Internationals was one of, if not the first events that I was seriously covering for PokeStats. And I was like, I've never heard of this guy before. And he goes in top 4s, and I was watching his top 4 match, and he slapped down Evil Tall Break. And, that was a card that was not really on anyone's radar. So I was like, oh, he's on to something.
Okay, that was him.
I'm pretty sure that was him.
Okay.
I'm like
I
95% sure
remember
that
that, but I didn't
him with the evil
know
tall break.
who he was
So
at the
so
time.
he was a little bit on my radar, and then he showed up again for North America, and I was like, oh yeah, this guy. It's the evil tall break guy. It's the top four from London guy. Let's see what he can do. And sure enough, he took down the whole thing.
Yeah,
Um, and that's when I was at that point, everyone should know who Tord Reklev is.
right.
He's got to be one of the best players in the world. So I definitely agree with you that he's a contender for Player of the Year.
And
Even last season, before you even consider his
right.
international win this
So I was about
year.
to say, if it were
Yeah.
the year of 2017, I think he would be hands down the winner.
Right. I don't think it
But
would even be close. Maybe Sam Chen. It's between him and Sam Chen.
but anyways, he's definitely a contender for last season.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Okay. So let's see. I was doing. Okay. So another contender we had that I wanted to talk about was Igor Costa, and he was a little bit under my radar just in terms of like, I immediately thought of Sam and Tord and one other player. There were three players that I immediately thought of like, oh, they've got to be contenders. And I was once again going through the Limitless rankings, and I'm looking at Igor, and I'm gonna actually pull it up right now so I don't get the stats wrong.
Okay.
But all right, so to start off the season, Orlando, Dallas, Anaheim, Roanoke, Toronto. That's five regionals all in a row that he attended, and he top eighted all of them, and that's really impressive to me. It looks. I guess he attended other regionals besides those, obviously, but like I'm going through Limitless, and those five are all listed in a row.
Wow.
So, yeah, but I mean, even just five top eights in a season is impressive, and
Right.
he didn't actually get a win that season. He got a second place.
Right.
It was Dallas. He lost to Xander because it was Mewtwo versus Mega Gardevoir, and you know how that goes.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, he was just remarkably consistent with the top eights. Like pretty much every time he made it into day two, he was advancing on to top eight, and that once again just speaks to his skill as a player. Where once you get into day two, you're starting to play against some of the really good players. You're not just grinding through the day one Swiss rounds against maybe
Right.
some worse players, lesser known players. You're hitting the names that really matter, and he was consistently coming out at the very top of those names. So even though like he didn't have any big wins, and he did get a fourth place at North American Internationals. I almost forgot about that.
Yeah.
It was he was one of the first people to play the Decidueye Ninetales deck. I think he was breaking that out for Indianapolis.
Okay.
So I think when you combine that top four at Indianapolis with his five regional top eights, he's got to be a contender for Player of the Year just based on that consistency. Always getting to the top of events.
He was definitely one of the ones I was considering as well. But the third person I was really considering, besides Sam and Tord, was Azul. So Azul, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure he top eighted two regionals, he top four a regional, and he won two regionals.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm almost positive, and I think he had two top 32s as well. So I'm not 100% sure on that, but I may be like off on one of those, but I think he had two top 32s, two top 8s, a top 4, and two firsts, which is insane. To win two regionals in a season, I want to say, not just a calendar year, but within a single season, I want to say that's only been done once or twice before. I'm pretty sure Sosa did it, and I'm not sure if it has happened again in terms of North American regionals.
I think Sosa did it, and I honestly don't know. I mean, my knowledge of the game in like several years back is not that strong, but I don't know that that's been done beyond Sosa and Azul.
I'm pretty sure Sosa did it in like within a month, or like back-to-back weekends or
Yeah,
something like
that sounds right.
So, but anyways, so that's super impressive. Not only winning two in a single season, but
Hmm.
two top eights, a top four, and two top 32s. It's like insane. And I may be wrong on I think that's right, but I may be wrong on one of those. But
Yeah, that I think that's just about right. I mean, definitely the two wins is huge. It was Orlando was, I think, the first regional of the season. He came, or no, it was the second. Sorry, Phoenix
yeah,
was the
he won
first.
Orlando,
Yeah, so he won the second regional of the season. That was Evil Tall Garb,
and then he
and he
won
won
Toronto.
Toronto, and that was Laurentis Vileplume.
Hmm.
Which actually, I think he might have been the only person in day two with Laurentis Vileplume. The regional before that, there were a lot of players like Ross Cawthon was one that were in day two with Laurentis Plume, but I think Azul was the only one who stuck with it for that next expanded regional, and it paid off for him big time.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning the size of the regionals. We're at about 350 and about 650, I think.
Yeah.
So, anyways, he's one of my picks as well. So go ahead with the last.
So the fifth name, you know, pretty much whenever you're talking about giving out a Player of the Year award, you've got to have this guy. You've got to be thinking about him, and that's Michael Pramwat. He won his fifth regional, and he won London Internationals. So that's, winning the first ever internationals was really big. Just taking down so many good players in that top eight. Like Tord was one of them. I don't know if he played against Tord, but like he was in that top eight bracket with Tord, with Jay Lesage. There were some other big names in there that I'm forgetting right now. But just like really proving his skill with that London win. And then on top of that, tying Israel Sosa's 5 regional win record, and setting up that race to 6 that he eventually won very early in this season. So even if you don't look at any of his other performances, just those 2 right there have to put him in contention.
Sure.
But of course, he was making all kinds of other day 2s. I'm going to have to check and see if he made any other top 8s, but I would assume he did. Yeah. Oh, he actually did not make another top 8, but he had 2 more day 2s. So definitely he didn't have the consistency that we would give to Igor or Azul or Sam Chen maybe in terms of like consistently making top 8s, but just picking up an internationals win and a regionals win. That might even be more impressive than Azul's 2 regional wins.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely winning your 5th regional has got to put you, it makes you an option for one of the greatest of all time. So.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I honestly, before we started talking about this, I was like, all right, I know who my pick is. And now I'm like, I don't know. I'm much less confident now.
It's hard to decide.
Okay, so let's do a quick overview again.
Quick overview.
Just
all right.
the biggest things that they did.
I'll run them all down. Here we go.
Okay.
Sam Chen, top 8 worlds, top 8 North American internationals, win a regional.
Did he top 4 in AIC or top? No, he got top 8 in AIC.
I think it was a top 4.
Because I think did Tord beat Ryan and then Sam? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Sorry, top 8 worlds, top 4 in AIC.
He had those, and then he top 4 2 other regionals. So regional win, 2 regional top 4s, top 4 internationals, and top 8 worlds.
Okay.
Next up, we have Azul, 2 regional wins, and just too many other day 2s and top 8s to even count. He was just, huge on day 2 of regionals. Michael Pramwat, 2 regional day 2s, a regional win, which was his 5th all-time, and that London Internationals win, first ever Internationals winner. Igor Costa, 5 regional top 8s and a 4th place at North American Internationals, or top 4.
Okay.
And finally, Tord Reklev, the only player to top 4 2 internationals.
Yeah.
And that's now 3, but we're only talking about last season.
Right.
And he put up a slew of other impressive performances in Europe in addition to that. So those are our five that we narrowed it down
And
to.
I do want to mention one thing. The reason I don't have Casiraga on here is because he didn't really. I didn't see his name on anything outside of Worlds. Like I didn't see him in Latin American NAIC. I mean South America NAIC.
No, I think he was in there for South America,
Was
but
he?
I'll check it.
I don't think
I'll
he was
check
top
it.
32 or anything. But anyways, I don't think he had. I didn't see his name, so I could just be wrong on this. But I looked and I didn't see his name on anything outside of winning
No,
Worlds. So
he top eighted South America.
okay, he top 8 South America.
Yeah,
That's
and
pretty
he
significant.
actually, granted, there's far fewer regionals in South America than North America, but he took a first place and a third place at regionals in Brazil and Chile. So
Okay.
maybe that even adds another. I should have thought of him earlier.
Yeah.
World champion, top 8 internationals, third at a regionals, first at a regionals. That we might have to open this up to 6 now.
Yeah, I think we do.
We're making this harder for ourselves.
Okay. My 4 that I'm really considering out of 6. Azul. Actually, no. I
Well,
think what
what's-
Tor did, winning and top 4ing, right?
Yep.
I think that is winning the biggest tournament ever and top 4ing another international is more impressive than
Winning 2 regionals.
winning 2
or-
regionals than having a bunch of top 8s or top 4s and not
What
winning.
about winning an international and a regional? Because that's what Pram did.
That's tough.
Would you rather have the international win plus the regional win, or would you rather have the international win plus not another win, but a top 4 at another international?
Well, I'll say this. I think winning the NAIC is more prestigious than winning any other international challenge because of the size.
I would agree with that. I would definitely agree with that.
And then I think 4th at. I'm leaning towards Tord, and that's who I was leaning towards when I came in, and maybe that's why I'm still there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It might have.
And then
and I
Diego's
almost-
like, ugh.
I almost feel like if I'm gonna say Tord, I feel like it's skewed a little bit just by
The
also
fact that he won
his
in the
most
EUIC.
recent win,
Yeah.
which is not at all to undercut what he did last season because that was impressive too.
Right.
It's such a hard call.
It really is.
So I'm gonna
And then Diego won a regional, won Worlds.
yeah.
Uh,
But then the argument that you would have against Diego was his regional wins or his regional win and top 4 are maybe less impressive than some others because of the
size.
smaller size of South American regionals.
Right.
So that's another thing to throw into the mix.
yeah. I think I'm going with Tord.
I think you're going with Tord. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So I'm gonna lay mine out because I'm still agonizing over it in my head.
Okay.
But just for the sake of coming to a conclusion to close out this video, I'm gonna go with Sam Chen.
Okay.
I think winning a regional, when you win one regional, you put yourself in the running. When you win a regional and then you top 4 2 regionals, and then you top 4 the largest tournament of all time, you've really put yourself up there. And then when you go play in the biggest and last tournament of the year, which is Worlds, and you make top 8 at that too, I don't really know how you can have a better season than that, even when you only got the one actual win.
I keep forgetting that he won a regional. I keep
Tough.
forgetting
Like
that.
he did have a win, and there were people with more than one major win, but in terms of like what he did, which was, and these were like all in a row. It was a streak. He was like, oh, Sam Jensen top 8 again. Sam Jensen top 8 again. Sam Jensen top 8 again. And I think it was just every time I watched him, I was like, he is so good at this game. And it's a really tough decision for sure, but just for the sake of like coming to a conclusion, I have to go with Sam Chen. I think what he did is unbelievable.
You're convincing me. um, but yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there.
Just
But
kind of that works for me. I think the more important thing is having the discussion over
yeah,
it rather than, reaching one conclusion.
yeah.
I agree with you.
Um, but anyways, sorry for the long drawn out going back and forth and confusion there at the end.
We
But
get to hear the gears turning in our brains.
yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you stuck through to the end, really appreciate it, and hopefully we're gonna keep doing this. So we'll see this again in, I guess, 9 months, since we did this one 3 months late, and then annually after that. And hopefully we were hoping to do it with a couple others, but hopefully next year it'll work out that we can have a slightly larger panel. Um, but thank you so much for joining me. I
Yeah, it
really,
was a
I
good
really,
time. It was a good
really
time.
appreciate the content that you put out. I reference it a lot. So thank you for doing that. Are there any shout outs or anything that you would like to give?
Um, at the risk of sounding a little bit corny, I really do want to give a shout out to the entire community that's been really welcoming just to someone who no one had heard of a year ago and who now is, just referenced all the time by top players like, oh, did you see that thing from PokeStats? Did you see what PokeStats had to say about this?
Hmm.
Um, and I'm just really thankful that I saw an opportunity to create something that wasn't, in existence that I thought the game needed to maybe get to that next level.
For sure.
And it's really been warmly embraced by the community. And there's a lot of really nice people who have helped me out and who have given me suggestions, given me advice. So I'm really thankful for all of that. And in the rest of the season and next season and all beyond that, I will continue producing the best content that I can for PokeStats and seeing how it evolves in the future. But thank you to everyone.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate what you do. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you guys for watching. Peace.